After her reckless stunt at a charity gala cost her father's company a multi-million-dollar contract, real estate mogul Jackson Reid made a decision that shocked everyone in their elite social circle. He sent his privileged daughter Emma to work on his childhood friend's organic farm in rural Vermont with no credit cards, no designer clothes, and nowhere to hide from honest work. What began as a desperate father's last attempt to teach responsibility would ultimately transform not only his wayward daughter's future, but his own perspective on what success truly means. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Manhattan skyline glittered through the floor to ceiling. Windows of Reid Enterprises executive suite, where Jackson Reid stood contemplating the latest disaster caused by his only daughter. At 55, Jackson had built his real estate empire from nothing, transforming a single investment property purchased with a scraped-together down payment into a billion-dollar development company with luxury properties across 3 continents. His silver-peppered dark hair and custom Italian suit projected the image of success he had worked relentlessly to achieve after escaping rural poverty 4 decades ago. But the email displayed on his tablet made his jaw clench in frustration. Emma, his 23-year-old daughter, had just informed him she would not be attending tomorrow's crucial meeting with Japanese investors, a meeting specifically arranged around her schedule so she could present the sustainable housing initiative he had created for her to lead. Her excuse: a last-minute invitation to a celebrity yacht party in Miami that was too important to miss. Damn it," Jackson muttered, tossing the tablet onto his mahogany desk with enough force to make his assistant glance up from her workstation outside his glass-walled office. This wasn't Emma's first dereliction of duty. Last month, she had abandoned a community revitalization project mid-planning to attend Coachella. Before that, she'd shown up hungover to a meeting with potential investors, spending most of it checking social media on her phone. Jackson scrolled through his social media feed, where Emma's latest posts showcased her extravagant lifestyle, designer shopping sprees, champagne brunches, and partying with influencers whose names he barely recognized. In one photo, she posed beside the Lamborghini he'd given her for her 21st birthday, captioned, "Daddy's money, my playground. Billionaire, heiress, no responsibilities." The Reid name meant something in New York real estate circles: integrity, innovation, reliability. Emma seemed determined to transform it into a synonym for vapid privilege and entitlement. Jackson opened his photo gallery to a picture taken years ago, Emma at 10, perched on his shoulders at the grand opening of their Chicago development, her eyes wide with excitement and pride in her father's accomplishment. When had that bright-eyed girl disappeared? When had she transformed into this stranger who treated his life's work as nothing more than her personal ATM? He thought about his own childhood on his parents' struggling farm in rural Vermont, the pre-dawn harvests, the endless physical labor, the careful accounting of every penny to ensure they didn't lose the land that had been in the family for generations. By 13, he knew every aspect of running a sustainable farm operation. By 16, he was helping with the books and suggesting innovative ways to increase profitability. By 18, he'd earned a scholarship to Cornell, his ticket to a different future. His daughter had never known anything like that hard-scrabble existence. Instead, she'd attended elite private schools, vacationed in exotic locations, and had every desire fulfilled almost before she could articulate it. Jackson knew he was partly to blame. After his wife Sophia died of cancer when Emma was 11, he'd compensated for his grief and frequent absences by indulging Emma's every whim. When Emma wanted to study art, he built her a studio. When she wanted to travel, he arranged luxury accommodations and private tours. When she totaled her first Mercedes, he replaced it with a more expensive model, hoping material things could fill the void left by her mother's absence and his workaholic tendencies. His executive assistant's voice interrupted his thoughts through the intercom. "Mr. Reid, the development team is waiting in the conference room for the Brooklyn waterfront presentation." "I'll be right there," Jackson replied, straightening his tie and pulling himself back to the present. As he walked down the corridor lined with architectural awards and framed magazine covers featuring his success story, he tried to focus on the upcoming presentation, a mixed-use development that would revitalize a struggling neighborhood while generating substantial profits. But his thoughts kept returning to Emma and the social impact initiative she was supposed to be spearheading. The program would create affordable, sustainable housing units within each of their luxury developments, ensuring that gentrification didn't displace existing communities. It was a chance for her to make a meaningful contribution, to understand that their wealth came with responsibility. Instead, she treated it as an optional hobby, discardable whenever something more entertaining came along. The board meeting proceeded as expected, with detailed discussions of zoning challenges, construction timelines, and marketing strategies. Jackson presented confidently, never letting his personal concerns affect his professional demeanor. "And what about the Community Integration Initiative?" asked Diane Chen, one of his most astute board members. "I understood Emma would be presenting the latest developments today." "Emma sends her regrets," Jackson replied smoothly, the lie burning in his throat. "She's handling an unexpected situation with one of our community partners. Our sustainability director will cover that segment at next week's meeting. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." After the meeting concluded, Jackson returned to his office and pulled up Emma's Instagram. Again, while he'd been securing the company's future, she had been posting stories from a luxury boutique, trying on outfits that each cost more than what many families earned in a month. Her latest post showed her holding shopping bags from 5 designer stores with the caption, "Retail therapy is still therapy. Treat yourself. Self-care." Something inside Jackson snapped. This wasn't merely embarrassing, it was undermining everything he'd built. The affordable housing initiative had been his way of involving Emma in meaningful work, of showing her that their success could benefit others. Instead, she treated it as an inconvenience, something to be avoided whenever possible. His phone rang, the head of PR calling about damage control. "We need to discuss the West Side project," she began without preamble. The Community Action Group noticed Emma's absence at yesterday's planning meeting, and they're questioning our commitment to the project. They've mentioned taking their concerns to the press. By the time Jackson left the office that evening, the company had spent hours in crisis management mode, reassuring partners that Reid Enterprises remained committed to community development, despite Emma's conspicuous absence from meetings she had promised to attend. As his driver navigated through Manhattan's evening traffic toward his Upper East Side penthouse, Jackson made a decision. This pattern couldn't continue. Something had to change, dramatically and immediately. He called the one person who might understand, the one connection to his past life that remained strong despite the decades and divergent paths. Catherine Blackwell, his childhood best friend, who now ran an organic farm in Vermont, the neighboring property to his parents' former land, which she had purchased when Jackson's parents retired. "Cat, it's Jackson. I need a favor, a big one." He had no idea how significantly that call would change everything, or how his decision would set in motion a transformation that would reshape both his and Emma's lives forever. The Reid penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a prestigious Upper East Side building, featuring panoramic views of Central Park and museum-quality artwork throughout its 8,000 square feet. As Jackson's car pulled up to the building, he noticed the doorman helping a group of laughing young people into taxis, all dressed for clubbing, despite it being only Tuesday evening. "Is there an event in the building tonight?" Jackson asked the doorman as he exited his car. "No, sir. Those were guests of Miss Emma's," the doorman replied with professional neutrality. "They've been coming and going all afternoon." Jackson nodded, his frustration mounting as he took the private elevator to his penthouse. The sound of music greeted him before the doors opened, revealing that his home had been transformed into an impromptu party venue. At least 30 people, most strangers to Jackson, filled his living room and spilled onto the wraparound terrace overlooking the park. A bartender was mixing drinks at his antique console table, using bottles from his private collection of rare spirits. Someone had moved the furniture to create a dance area where several couples were swaying to the music. A group of young men and women were clustered around his dining table, where lines of white powder were clearly visible. Jackson felt a cold anger settle in his chest as he surveyed the scene. His home, the private sanctuary he had created after years of work, had been turned into a nightclub without his knowledge or permission. He spotted Emma in the center of the room, wearing a dress he didn't recognize, but had undoubtedly paid for. Her honey-blonde hair, professionally highlighted and styled, caught the light as she laughed at something one of her companions said. "Emma." His voice wasn't particularly loud, but there was a quality to it that made several people nearby glance up nervously. Emma turned, her expression of annoyance quickly replaced with forced brightness. "Daddy, you're home early." She made her way over to him, air-kissing his cheek. "Everyone, this is my father, the famous Jackson Reid." A few people murmured greetings. One young man, wearing an outfit that probably cost more than some of Jackson's employees earned in a month, stepped forward with an outstretched hand. "Mr. Reid, such an honor. I'm a huge fan of your downtown arts district development, revolutionary approach to mixed-use space." Jackson ignored the hand. "The party's over," he said, his gaze never leaving Emma's face. "Everyone out, now." "Dad," Emma hissed, her smile faltering. "You can't just—" "I said now," Jackson repeated, raising his voice slightly. He turned to address the room. "If you're not out of my home in 5 minutes, I'm calling security. And if I see evidence of illegal substances when you leave, I'll be calling the police as well." With a nod to his building's security chief, who had appeared at his side after being alerted by the doorman, Jackson watched as the staff efficiently began clearing the penthouse. Complaints and protests quickly faded under the stern guidance of security personnel. Within minutes, the music cut off, leaving an uncomfortable silence punctuated by the sound of reluctant departures. Emma stood with arms crossed, face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "I can't believe you just did that," she said once they were alone. "Do you have any idea who some of those people were?" "Trey Winters was here. His father runs Winter Media Group. Carter and Blake Phillips were here too. They're practically social media royalty." "I know exactly who the Winters and Phillips families are," Jackson replied evenly. "And I know their children are known primarily for spending their parents' money and creating publicity problems. Is that the company you're keeping now?" Emma rolled her eyes. "God, you're so dramatic. It was just a small get-together." "A small get-together in my home without permission, with drugs on my dining table, while you were supposed to be preparing for tomorrow's investor meeting." Jackson kept his voice level with effort. "Do you have any idea what happened today? Because you decided a shopping spree was more important than your commitments. I'm sure whatever it was, your army of employees handled it," she said dismissively, dropping onto a leather sofa and checking her phone. "That's what you pay them for, right?" Jackson plucked the phone from her hands. "Hey!" she protested. "We nearly lost the backing of the Neighborhood Revitalization Coalition because of your no-show yesterday. The Japanese investors you're supposed to meet tomorrow specifically requested your presentation on sustainable development because it aligns with their corporate values." And instead of preparing, you're hosting a party with people who contribute nothing to society except Instagram posts. So what? Emma stood, retrieving a half-empty champagne flute from a side table. The coalition will come back when you throw enough money at whatever cause they're pretending to care about this month. And the Japanese guys will invest anyway, because they know your projects make money. Jackson felt a familiar headache beginning. Behind his eyes, how had he raised someone with so little understanding of consequences, so little respect for the work that provided her extravagant lifestyle? "Your mother would be ashamed," he said quietly. Emma's expression darkened. "Don't you dare bring Mom into this. You don't get to use her against me. I'm not using her, I'm stating a fact. Sophia valued integrity, commitment, following through on your word, all things you seem to think are optional. Well, she's not here, is she?" Emma's voice cracked slightly. "And you weren't either most of the time, too busy building your precious company to actually parent me." There it was, the guilt that always made him back down in the past. Not tonight. "You're right," Jackson said, surprising her. "I made mistakes after your mother died. I buried myself in work instead of focusing on you. I tried to make up for it by giving you everything you wanted. And now you regret it?" she asked, a hint of vulnerability showing through her defiance. "I regret not giving you what you needed instead of what you wanted." Jackson set her phone on the coffee table. "You needed boundaries, structure, consequences." "What I needed was a father, not a wallet," Emma muttered. "Fair enough. But what you've become isn't entirely my fault. Emma, you're 23 years old, an adult. You make your own choices. Like choosing not to be part of your gentrification empire?" She shot back. "Sorry, I'm not the perfect corporate princess you wanted." Jackson shook his head. "This isn't about you joining the company. This is about basic responsibility. You committed to a project helping underprivileged families access affordable housing, and you abandoned it for a shopping spree. Not because you disagreed with the mission or had a better idea, because it required effort." As they argued, the housekeeping staff had begun quietly restoring order to the penthouse. Jackson noticed one of them carefully replacing a small sculpture, a Yuji Brancusi original worth more than most people's homes, that had been moved to make room for the makeshift bar. "The truth is, Emma, you've never had to work for anything in your life," he continued. "You've never faced real consequences for your actions." Emma laughed bitterly. "What are you going to do? Cut off my allowance? Take away my credit cards? We've been through this before, Daddy. It lasts a week, then you get busy with work and everything goes back to normal." She was right, and they both knew it. His previous attempts at discipline had always faded as work demands pulled his attention away, but things were different now. The phone call he'd made earlier had set something in motion that wouldn't be easily undone. "Not this time," Jackson said, his resolve strengthening. "You need perspective. You need to understand that the world doesn't revolve around Emma Reid and her desires." "Whatever." She made to leave the room. "I'm going to bed. You can continue this lecture tomorrow, or whenever your next available slot opens up in your calendar." "Pack a bag," Jackson said. Emma stopped, turning slowly. "Excuse me? You heard me. Pack a bag. Clothes for a month. Practical things. Jeans, t-shirts, work boots if you have them, though I doubt it." "Leave for where?" Confusion replaced some of her anger. "Vermont. My friend Catherine's organic farm, the one next to where I grew up." Emma stared at him, waiting for the punchline. When none came, she burst out laughing. Right, sure, Dad. I'm going to milk cows and pull weeds. Hilarious." "I've never been more serious," Jackson said, his voice steady. 1 month, no credit cards, no shopping, no parties, just honest work from sunrise to sunset." The laughter died on Emma's lips as she realized he wasn't joking. "You can't be serious. I'm not some teenager you can ground, Dad. I'm an adult." Then act like one, Jackson challenged. Adults keep their commitments. Adults understand that privileges come with responsibilities. Adults recognize that actions have consequences. This is insane, Emma said, her voice rising. I'm not going to some backward farm in the middle of nowhere. You can't make me. You're right, I can't force you, Jackson conceded. You have a choice. 1 month at the farm, or you're completely cut off. Not just your allowance or credit. Cards, everything. The apartment in Soho, the car, the trust fund that matures next year, all of it. Her face paled. You wouldn't. His expression was implacable. I pulled myself out of poverty through hard work. I built everything I have from nothing, and I won't watch you throw away your potential because you've never had to work for anything in your life. Tears welled in Emma's eyes, whether from anger, shock, or genuine emotion. Jackson couldn't tell. I hate you, she whispered. You can hate me all you want, he replied evenly. From Vermont. The silence between them stretched taut as Emma realized the extent of her father's resolve. This wasn't an idle threat or a temporary punishment. For once in her life, Jackson Reid was giving her a real consequence with no easy escape route. Fine, she finally spat. 1 month, and then you'll see what a massive mistake this is. As she stormed upstairs, phone clutched in a white-knuckled grip, Jackson sank onto the sofa, suddenly exhausted. He wondered if he was doing the right thing, or if he was about to make everything worse. But one thought kept circling in his mind. Something had to change, and sometimes the only way forward was through discomfort. Little did he know just how much discomfort and transformation awaited both of them in the month to come. The private jet descended through wisps of early morning clouds, revealing the vast landscape of Vermont below. Rolling hills covered in, dense forests, patchwork farmland, and the distant silhouettes of mountain ranges replaced the urban cityscape Emma was accustomed to. In the dawn light, the terrain looked alien and unwelcoming. Emma hadn't spoken to her father since they boarded the plane in New York. She sat across the aisle, AirPods firmly in place, designer sunglasses hiding her red-rimmed eyes despite the cabin's dimness. She'd spent the night making frantic calls to friends, looking for a way out of her father's ultimatum. None materialized. Jackson glanced at his daughter, noting the inappropriate outfit she'd chosen for farm arrival. White designer jeans, a cashmere sweater, and impractical leather boots with 3-inch heels. Hardly suitable for where she was headed, but he'd decided to let reality be the teacher, rather than criticizing her choices. We'll be landing in about 10 minutes, he said, loud enough to penetrate her music. Emma yanked out an AirPod. Congratulations. You've successfully kidnapped your adult daughter and transported her across state lines. Should I be expecting Stockholm Syndrome to kick in by day 3 or 4? Jackson sighed. This isn't a kidnapping, Emma. It's an opportunity. An opportunity? Ichi repeated incredulously. To do what? Develop allergies? Get trampled by livestock? Die of boredom? To learn something about yourself, about where you come from, about what it means to earn something instead of expecting it to be handed to you. I know exactly who I am, Emma snapped, and where I come from is New York, not whatever town we're landing in. Riverdale, Jackson supplied. Population 1,900, and half your DNA comes from this place, whether you like it or not. The jet touched down on a small regional airstrip where a faded blue pickup truck waited on the tarmac. Emma peered through the window and groaned. Please tell me that's not our ride. That would be Kat's truck. Been running for nearly 20 years, Jackson said with fondness. She'll drive you to the farm. I'll be staying in Burlington to handle some business before heading back tomorrow. You're not even staying? For the first time, true alarm flashed across Emma's face. You're just dumping me with strangers. Catherine Blackwell is hardly a stranger. She was my best friend growing up, like a sister to me. And her son Dylan runs the farm with her now. He's about your age, actually. Oh my God, Emma muttered. You sound like a Hallmark movie cliché. They deplaned into the crisp morning air. The temperature was at least 15 degrees cooler than New York, and Emma immediately wrapped her arms around herself, shivering slightly. A tall, athletic woman in her early 50s approached, dressed in worn jeans, a flannel shirt, and mud-splattered boots. Her face was tanned from years in the sun, laugh lines deepening as she broke into a wide smile at the sight of Jackson. "Jackson Reid!" she called out, striding forward with hand extended. "Still looking like you just stepped off a GQ cover, I see." Jackson grasped her hand, then pulled her into a tight hug. "Kat, it's been too long." 4 years, she confirmed, clapping him on the back. "Not since your company's 10th anniversary. Celebration." A shadow crossed Jackson's face. "I know. I should have visited more." "You're a busy man, we understand." Catherine's gaze shifted to Emma, who stood stiffly beside the plane. "And this must be your daughter. Last time I saw you, young lady, you were about 10 years old with braces and pigtails." Emma offered a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Charming. I don't remember you at all." If Catherine was offended by her coldness, she didn't show it. "Well, memory is a funny thing. Sometimes the most important parts of our past get buried until we need them again." She gestured to her truck. "Let's get your bags loaded up. Got a full day ahead, and the crops don't much care if we're running behind schedule." The pilot and co-pilot were already unloading Emma's luggage, a matching set of designer suitcases that looked comically out of place next to the mud-splattered pickup. "I said pack for a month, not move in permanently," Jackson commented, eyeing the mountain of bags. "You said pack practical things. This is me being practical," Emma retorted. "Unless you expected me to wear the same outfit for 30 days. Catherine chuckled. "Don't you worry about that. We've got a washing machine, runs just fine most days, unless the well pump's acting up." Emma's expression of horror made both adults struggle to contain their amusement. As Catherine began loading the luggage into the truck bed, Emma pulled her father aside. "This isn't funny anymore, Dad. You've made your point. I'll be more responsible. I'll show up to the next company event. I'll even apologize to those investors personally." Jackson studied his daughter's face. "This isn't just about one missed event, Em. It's about who you're becoming. You're better than the entitled person you've been acting like." "So this is what? Some kind of character improvement program? Poverty tourism to make me appreciate my privilege?" Her voice dripped with sarcasm. "No, it's a chance to connect with a part of your heritage that you've never known, the part that made me who I am. I don't need to pull weeds to appreciate that you grew up poor, Dad." Jackson shook his head. "That's not what this is about. We weren't poor in the ways that mattered. We had food on the table, a roof over our heads, and purpose in our lives. What we lacked in material wealth, we made up for in other ways." "Whatever helps you sleep at night," Emma muttered. "All packed up," Catherine announced, securing the last suitcase under a tarp. "Ready when you are, Miss Reid." Emma turned to her father, a last desperate appeal in her eyes. "Dad, please don't do this." Jackson hesitated. In that moment, she looked so much like Sophia, the same stubborn set to her jaw, the same vulnerability behind her defiance. But he thought of the path Emma was heading down, of the empty, purposeless life that awaited her if something didn't change. "1 month," he said firmly. "You can do anything for 1 month." "I'll never forgive you for this," she whispered. "Maybe," Jackson acknowledged, "but I hope someday you'll thank me." Tears threatened again, but Emma blinked them back, furiously. With deliberate movements, she reached into her designer handbag and removed her smartphone, credit cards, and tablet, thrusting them at her father. "Fine, take them. I won't need reminders of civilization where I'm going, right?" Jackson accepted the items, surprised by her initiative. "You can keep your phone for emergencies." No social media, though. What's the point? There's probably no reception anyway. She glanced at the vast emptiness surrounding them. And who would I call? My father who exiled me? My friends who will forget I exist the minute I'm gone? The bitterness in her voice made Jackson wince. Catherine has my number if you need anything, and I'll call to check in. Don't bother. With that, Emma turned and stalked toward the truck, her impractical heels sinking slightly into the gravel. She yanked open the passenger door and climbed in without another word or backward glance. Catherine approached Jackson, speaking quietly. She's got fire in her, just like you did at that age. Too much fire and not enough direction, Jackson replied. I'm hoping the farm can give her some perspective. We'll do our best, Catherine promised. But you know as well as anyone, the farm doesn't change people. It just shows them who they really are. She clapped Jackson on the shoulder. You still coming by for dinner before you head back tomorrow? Wouldn't miss your cooking for anything, Jackson confirmed. And I want to see the operation, how you've modernized things. Some things have changed, Catherine acknowledged. But the important stuff's the same as when we were kids. Hard work, sunrise to sunset, no shortcuts. As Catherine climbed into the driver's seat, Jackson approached the passenger window. Emma stared straight ahead, refusing to look at him. I love you, Em, he said softly. Remember that. She gave no indication she'd heard him. The truck's engine roared to life, belching a cloud of exhaust as Catherine put it in gear. Jackson stood watching as the vehicle pulled away, carrying his daughter toward an experience he hoped would change her life. Only when the truck had disappeared, down the rural road, did he allow doubt to creep in. Was he doing the right thing, or was he about to permanently damage his relationship with the only family he had left? The sound of the jet engines warming up again pulled him from his thoughts. His phone buzzed with notifications. Crisis at the office, investors demanding updates, board members questioning strategy changes. Reality beckoned as it always did. Jackson turned and walked back to the plane, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in his chest. There was nothing more he could do for Emma now, except hope that the farm would work its magic on her, just as it once had on him. Meanwhile, in the truck, Emma pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window, watching the unfamiliar landscape blur past. A single tear tracked down her cheek, which she wiped away angrily before Catherine could notice. It ain't as bad as all that, Catherine said kindly, keeping her eyes on the winding road ahead. Might even find you like it after a while. I doubt that very much, Emma replied coldly. But as the truck crested a hill, revealing a sprawling valley below, with mountains rising majestically in the distance, something stirred within her. A reluctant flicker of curiosity about this place that had shaped her father, and by extension, her own existence. She quickly suppressed it. This was punishment, not an adventure, and she was determined to hate every minute of it. Little did she know that the moment the truck turned onto the long driveway of Blackwell Organic Farm, her life would begin changing in ways neither she nor her father could have predicted. The truck rumbled down a winding dirt road flanked by ancient maple trees before turning onto a long driveway. A weathered wooden sign proclaimed Blackwell Organic Farm, Esther 1902, in hand-painted letters. As they drove past open fields dotted with workers tending to rows of vegetables, Emma caught her first glimpse of what would be her home for the next month. Unlike the pristine, Pinterest-worthy farm she'd half expected, Blackwell Farm was undeniably authentic. The white farmhouse, with its wide front porch and green shutters, appeared well-maintained but showed its age. Several outbuildings in various states of repair surrounded a central yard area. A red barn stood off to one side, while a greenhouse glinted in the morning sunlight. Farm equipment, much of it looking decidedly vintage, was parked near the outbuildings. "Home sweet home," Catherine announced, cutting the engine. "Been in my family for 4 generations now." Emma remained motionless in her seat, staring at the farmhouse with undisguised apprehension. No high-rises, no boutiques, no crowds of people, just open space, manual labor, and isolation stretching as far as she could see. "You coming?" Catherine asked, already out of the truck and unloading Emma's bags. With a deep sigh, Emma pushed open the door and stepped out. Her designer boots immediately sank into the soft earth of the driveway, and she grimaced as mud splattered the pristine white leather. "Might want to watch your step," Catherine said, failing to hide her amusement. "Spring rains leave the ground pretty soft." Before Emma could respond, the farmhouse door swung open. A young man in his mid-20s emerged, wiping his hands on a dish towel, tall and broad-shouldered, with Catherine's auburn hair and an easy athleticism. He moved with the confidence of someone completely comfortable in their surroundings. He wore worn jeans, a faded t-shirt and mud-caked work boots. "That the city girl?" he asked bluntly, looking Emma up and down with undisguised skepticism. "Dylan," Catherine chided, "mind your manners. This is Emma Reid, Jackson's daughter. She's staying with us for a while." "Reid," the young man's eyebrows raised slightly, "as in Reid Enterprises, the sustainable development company." Emma's chin lifted, a flicker of her usual confidence returning. At least someone here recognized her family's status. "That's right. My father is the CEO and founder." Dylan let out a low whistle. "Interesting. I use your father's green building designs as case studies for my sustainable architecture thesis." Architecture. Emma couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. She'd assumed everyone here would be simple farmers with little education or worldly knowledge. "At UVM," Dylan confirmed, referring to the University of Vermont. "When I'm not helping run this place, I'm finishing my master's in sustainable design with a focus on agricultural communities." He gestured to her luggage. "Need help with those bags?" Before she could answer, he'd already hoisted 2 of her largest suitcases with ease. "I'll take these up to the guest room. Mum's got breakfast waiting and we've got seedlings to transplant after." As Dylan disappeared into the house, Emma found herself momentarily speechless. Her preconceptions about rural life were already being challenged, and she'd been here less than 5 minutes. "That boy," Catherine said fondly, watching her son, always rushing from one thing to the next. She turned to Emma. "Come on in and get settled. You can freshen up before breakfast if you'd like." Emma followed Catherine into the farmhouse, immediately enveloped by the scent of coffee, freshly baked bread, and something savory cooking on the stove. The interior was rustic but comfortable. Hardwood floors, practical furniture that prioritized function over fashion, and walls lined with family photographs spanning decades. "Bathrooms down that hall," Catherine pointed. "Guest rooms upstairs, first door on the right. It's nothing fancy, but the bed's comfortable." "Thank you," Emma murmured, feeling increasingly out of place in her expensive outfit and impractical shoes. "There's a pair of rubber boots by the door that should fit you," Catherine added. "And I've put some of my old work clothes in your room. They might be a bit big, but they'll do until we can get you proper things from town." "I brought clothes," Emma protested. Catherine's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Honey, those designer things you packed won't last a day around here. Farm work is hard on clothes." Before Emma could argue further, Catherine was guiding her toward the stairs. "Go on up and change. Breakfast is in 15 minutes, and then we'll start your orientation." The guest room was small, but neat, with a patchwork quilt on the twin bed, simple wooden furniture, and curtains that looked handmade. Emma's suitcases dominated the limited floor space. A stack of clothes, jeans, flannel shirts, and t-shirts sat folded on the bed with a note in flowing handwriting. "These might be more comfortable than what you're used to. Catherine." Emma sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed. The reality of her situation was sinking in. This wasn't a luxury resort with farm-themed activities. This was actual rural life with real work, real animals, and real people who seemed to expect her to participate fully in their daily routines. She considered calling her father, demanding he come get her immediately, but her phone was for emergencies only, and she'd been here less than an hour. Her pride wouldn't let her surrender so quickly. Instead, she reluctantly changed into a pair of Catherine's jeans, too loose in the waist, too short in the leg, and a faded flannel shirt that smelled faintly of lavender soap. She tried to make the outfit look more stylish by rolling the sleeves and adding a belt, but the mirror on the wall reflected back an image so unlike her usual self that she almost laughed. "Emma? Breakfast?" Catherine's voice called from downstairs. With a final glance at her reflection, Emma squared her shoulders and descended to the kitchen, where Catherine and Dylan were already seated around a large wooden table laden with food. A steaming platter of scrambled eggs, bacon, homemade bread, and a bowl of fruit that Emma couldn't immediately identify. "There she is," Catherine said approvingly. "Those clothes suit you better than those fancy things." Dylan, already halfway through a plate piled high with food, barely glanced up. "You'll want to eat your fill," he advised between bites. "Farm work burns calories like nothing else." "What exactly will I be doing?" Emma asked cautiously, taking the empty seat beside Catherine. "Today's Sunday, so it's a lighter schedule," Catherine explained, passing her the bread. "Basic orientation, seedling transplants, and helping with dinner prep. Tomorrow, the real work begins." "Here, try this with local honey," Dylan suggested, noticing Emma's hesitant approach to the food. "The honey's from our own hives." Emma took a small portion of eggs and half a slice of bread, ignoring the fruit she now recognized as fresh berries. "What is your specialty here?" she asked, attempting to sound interested. "We're a diversified organic operation," Catherine replied. "Vegetables, berries, some livestock, honey, and a small maple syrup production. Plus, we run a CSA program and a farm-to-table initiative with local restaurants." "CSA?" Emma questioned. "Community-supported agriculture," Dylan explained. "Local. Families buy shares of our harvest at the beginning of the season. They get fresh produce weekly, and we get guaranteed income regardless of market fluctuations." "It's a sustainable business model," Catherine added, "both environmentally and financially." Emma picked at her plate while the others ate heartily. The food was undeniably fresh and flavorful, but anxiety diminished her appetite. After breakfast, Catherine stood and stretched. "Time to get started. Dylan, you take Emma to the greenhouse while I finish the delivery orders." "I don't know anything about plants," Emma protested weakly. "You didn't know anything about farm breakfasts either, but you survived," Dylan replied with a hint of sarcasm. "Life's about learning new things. Now go put on those boots by the door." Regular. Shoes won't cut it where we're going. The rubber boots were at least a size too big and made an unpleasant squelching sound with each step as Emma followed Dylan across the muddy yard toward a large greenhouse. The morning air was crisp, filled with unfamiliar scents, earth, plants, and somewhere nearby, animals. "This is where we start most of our crops," Dylan explained, pushing open the greenhouse door. Inside, rows of tables held thousands of small plants in various stages of growth. The air was warm and humid, smelling of soil and green things. "Today, we're transplanting tomato seedlings," he continued, moving to a workstation set up with small pots, larger containers, and bags of soil. They've outgrown their starter cells and need to be moved to bigger pots before they go into the ground next month. "And I'm supposed to help with this?" Emma asked, eyeing the delicate plants skeptically. "Unless you'd prefer mucking out." "The goat pens," Dylan replied with a raised eyebrow. "Your choice." "Transplanting sounds fine," Emma said quickly. Dylan demonstrated the process, carefully removing each seedling from its cell, placing it in a larger pot, adding soil around it, and watering gently. His large hands displayed surprising dexterity with the fragile plants. "Now you try," he said, stepping aside to give her access to the workstation. Emma hesitantly picked up a seedling tray, mimicking his movements with exaggerated care. The first plant broke at the stem, and she looked up in alarm. "It's okay," Dylan assured her, his tone softening slightly. "Everyone kills a few at first. You need to support the root ball, not pull on the stem." He demonstrated again, moving his hands over hers to show the proper technique. Emma felt a strange flutter in her stomach at the contact, but pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on the task. By her 10th seedling, she had developed a rhythm, carefully transferring each tiny plant to its new home. There was something surprisingly satisfying about the work. Tangible results visible immediately as rows of newly potted plants accumulated. "Not bad," Dylan commented after watching her work for a while. "You've got steady hands." "I used to paint," Emma replied without thinking. "Watercolors, mostly." "Used to?" he asked. "I got busy with other things," she said vaguely, remembering the expensive art studio in her Manhattan apartment, unused for years despite her earlier passion for painting. They worked side by side for nearly 2 hours, falling into a companionable silence broken only by occasional instructions from Dylan. The repetitive nature of the task allowed Emma's mind to wander. She thought about her friends in New York, who were likely just waking up after a night of clubbing. Would they even notice her absence? Would they care? "So," Dylan said eventually, interrupting her thoughts, "what did you do to get exiled to farm purgatory?" Emma's hands stilled. "What makes you think I'm being punished?" Dylan gave her a knowing look. "Your father calls out of the blue after years of minimal contact, asking if we'll take his daughter for a month of farm work. You show up looking like you've been sentenced to hard labor. It doesn't take a genius." Emma sighed, resuming her transplanting. "I missed some important meetings, disappointed my father, the usual. The usual involves being sent to a farm in the middle of nowhere. The usual involves him being disappointed," Emma clarified. "The farm is a new punishment technique. Dylan considered this, and you couldn't just, show up to the meetings." Emma felt a flare of defensiveness. "It's more complicated than that." "Enlighten me," he challenged. "My father wants me to be something I'm not," she said after a moment. "Corporate, responsible, boring." "Responsible is boring?" Dylan asked, his tone neutral. "When it means giving up your entire life to sit in boardrooms discussing profit margins?" "Yes." Dylan finished a row of transplants before responding. "You know, my mother could have sold this farm after my grandfather died. Developers were offering millions for the land. She could be living on a beach somewhere instead of working 14-hour days." "So why didn't she?" Emma asked, genuinely curious. "Because some things matter more than easy money," he replied simply. "Because there's value in building something real, something that lasts beyond Instagram posts and party invitations." The pointed comment made Emma's cheeks flush with embarrassment. Had her father told them about her social media habits? "You don't know anything about me," she said coldly. "True," Dylan acknowledged, "and you don't know anything about us, but at least I'm trying to understand your world. What have you bothered to learn about farming since you got here?" The question stung because it contained an uncomfortable truth. Emma had approached this entire situation as something to be endured rather than an opportunity to learn. "I don't need to learn about farming," she replied defensively. "I'll be gone in a few weeks, back to civilization, where food comes from grocery stores, not directly from plants and animals." Dylan shook his head. "And that right there is the problem with most people. no idea where their food comes from or what it takes to produce it. He moved to the next tray of seedlings. You know, your father's company has one of the best urban agriculture initiatives in the country. The rooftop farm designs on his Manhattan buildings have revolutionized urban food access. Emma paused, surprised. What? No. He builds luxury, developments, high-end condos and office buildings. With integrated agricultural components, Dylan corrected. His Brooklyn project includes a 2-acre rooftop farm that provides fresh produce to local food banks and restaurants. That's news to me, Emma admitted, unsettled by this information about her father's work that she'd never bothered to learn. Dylan looked at her with sudden understanding. You really don't know much about your father's work, do you? The observation hit harder than Emma wanted to admit. She'd always viewed her father's business as the thing that provided their lifestyle, but not worth understanding in detail. Had she missed fundamental parts of who Jackson Reid really was? Discomfort with the conversation made her focus intently on the plants before her, carefully setting each seedling into its new pot with more care than she'd shown previously. I know enough, she said curtly. They worked in silence for a while, moving methodically from tray to tray. Despite her resistance, Emma found herself becoming more efficient at the task, her movements more confident than they had been an hour ago. Not bad, Dylan commented as they finished the last tray. You're a quick learner when you actually try. The backhanded compliment rankled, but Emma couldn't deny the tiny spark of satisfaction she felt at mastering even this small skill. She quickly suppressed it. Getting competent at farm chores wasn't something to feel proud of. It was just survival until she could escape. After the greenhouse work came lunch, which Emma now approached with genuine hunger rather than reluctance. Catherine's homemade vegetable soup and fresh bread, something Emma would have scoffed at a week ago, now tasted delicious after hours of physical work. You're getting some color in your cheeks, Catherine remarked, as Emma helped herself to seconds. Fresh air and honest work will do that. Sunburn and exhaustion, more likely, Emma replied, though with less bite than she might have managed. Days earlier. It was hard to maintain active hostility toward Catherine, whose kindness remained steadfast despite Emma's attitude. Dylan will show you the animal areas this afternoon, Catherine continued, refilling Emma's water glass. It's a good opportunity to see a different aspect of farming, as opposed to all the glamorous seedling transplanting I've been doing, Emma asked dryly. Catherine just smiled. You might be surprised, there's something special about working with animals. After lunch, Emma followed Dylan to a series of small paddocks and shelters where the farm's livestock lived. Unlike the industrial farm operations she'd vaguely imagined, the Blackwell animals appeared to have spacious, clean living areas and access to pasture. We practice rotational grazing, Dylan explained, leading her to a pen containing several goats. It's better for the animals and better for the land. A small brown goat approached the fence curiously, stretching its neck toward Emma. This is Hazel, Dylan said. She's the friendliest of the bunch. You can pet her if you want. Hesitantly, Emma reached out to touch the goat's head. The animal pushed against her hand, enthusiastically, making her smile despite herself. See? Not so terrible, Dylan observed. I never said animals were terrible, Emma defended herself. Just the idea of shoveling their waste and being stuck in the middle of nowhere for a month. Dylan opened a gate, entering the pen with a bucket of feed. Well, now you get to help with feeding time. Grab that second bucket. For the next hour, Emma helped distribute feed to goats, chickens, and a small herd of sheep. Each animal group had specific needs and behaviors that Dylan explained patiently. Despite her initial reluctance, Emma found herself engaged in the process, asking questions about breeding cycles, organic certification requirements, and the farm's approach. to animal healthcare. You actually seem interested, Dylan remarked as they finished the feeding rounds. I'm capable of learning, Emma replied, slightly defensive. Never said you weren't. Just surprised you're asking questions instead of complaining. Emma brushed. Hey, from her borrowed jeans. Well, I'm stuck here. Might as well understand what I'm being forced to do. Dylan studied her for a moment. You know, nobody's actually forcing you to do anything. You chose this over being cut off financially. That's still a choice. The truth of his statement silenced Emma momentarily. He was right. She had chosen this path, however reluctantly, because she couldn't imagine life without her father's financial support. Some choice, she muttered finally. More than most people get, Dylan pointed out. Some work their entire lives without ever having the luxury of choice at all. Before Emma could respond, Catherine called from the main house, waving them over. Phone call for you, Emma! Emma's heart leapt. Maybe her father had reconsidered this ridiculous punishment. Maybe one of her friends had somehow tracked her down. Maybe this ordeal would end sooner than expected. She jogged toward the house, leaving Dylan behind with the animals. It's your father, Catherine said, handing her an ancient-looking cordless phone. Dad? Emma said breathlessly. Have you changed your mind? Jackson's chuckle came through the line. Hello to you too, Emma. No, I haven't changed my mind. I'm calling to check in, as promised. Emma's excitement deflated. Oh, how was your first day on the farm? Thrilling, she replied sarcastically. I've transplanted seedlings and fed goats. Living the dream. Good, Jackson said, ignoring her tone. Catherine says you're doing well. She's being kind. I'm terrible at everything. You've been there less than a day, her father pointed out. No one expects you to be an expert farmer immediately. Emma paced the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. This is still ridiculous, Dad. What do you really expect me to learn here? There was a pause on the line. I expect you to learn that actions have consequences, that hard work has value, that there's more to life than parties and shopping. By playing farmer for a month? Emma couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. By experiencing something completely outside your comfort zone, Jackson corrected, by connecting with where food comes from, where I came from, and maybe even with parts of yourself you've been ignoring. Emma rolled her eyes, though her father couldn't see the gesture. Very profound, Dad. Did you read that in a parenting book? Emma, Jackson's voice took on a warning tone. This attitude is exactly why you're there. Fine, she sighed. I'm transplanting seedlings, feeding animals, and wearing borrowed clothes that don't fit. Happy? I'll be happy when you take this seriously. A voice in the background called his name. I have to go. Board meeting. I'll call again in a few days. Wait, Emma began, but the line had already gone dead. She handed the phone back to Catherine, who had been pretending not to listen from the nearby sink. Everything okay? Catherine asked, drying her hands on a dish towel. Perfect, Emma replied flatly. My exile continues as planned. Catherine's expression softened. It gets easier, you know. The work, the adjustment to a different pace of life. Give it time. I don't want it to get easier, Emma said, surprising herself with her honesty. Getting comfortable here means accepting this punishment, and I'm not ready to do that. Maybe it's not about punishment at all, Catherine suggested gently. Maybe it's about discovering something you didn't know you were missing. Emma had no response for that. The idea that her father might have sent her here for something more meaningful than simple discipline was unsettling. It suggested he knew her better than she wanted to admit, understood emptiness in her life that she herself had been unwilling to acknowledge. I should get back to work, she said finally, turning toward the door. Actually, Catherine replied, I could use your help with dinner preparation. We're having guests tonight. neighbors who help with the big harvests. It's a farm tradition to feed them well in return. Cooking had never been Emma's forte. Manhattan had delivery services for everything, but she found herself nodding. "What do you need me to do?" "Let's start with something simple. Can you chop vegetables?" For the remainder of the afternoon, Emma worked alongside Catherine in the farmhouse kitchen, learning to prepare a meal entirely from ingredients produced on the farm or by nearby neighbors. The process was more complex than Emma had imagined, but also more satisfying than she'd expected. "You're not half bad at this," Catherine commented, as Emma carefully assembled a berry tart following handwritten instructions. "With practice, you might even enjoy cooking." "It's different when you know where everything came from," Emma admitted, remembering the berries she'd helped harvest that morning, the vegetables she'd transplanted as seedlings, the eggs gathered fresh from the henhouse. "That's the beauty of farm to table," Catherine smiled. "Connection to your food changes your relationship with it." As Emma arranged berries in a circular pattern atop the tart, she realized she was experiencing a moment of genuine contentment. No phone pinging with notifications, no pressure to document the experience for social media, just the simple satisfaction of creating something with her hands. The feeling was foreign but not unpleasant, a small crack in the wall of resistance she'd built around this experience. When Dylan entered the kitchen later, muddy from afternoon fieldwork, he stopped short at the sight of Emma carefully removing a perfectly golden tart from the oven. "You bake?" he asked, surprise evident in his voice. "Apparently I do," Emma replied with a small smile. "First time for everything, I guess." "First of many," Catherine interjected, with a knowing glance between the two young people. "You've only just begun to discover what you're capable of, Emma Reid." Emma turned back to her tart, uncomfortable with the weight of expectation in Catherine's words. She wasn't here to discover hidden talents or forge a connection with farm life. She was here to serve her time and return to New York as quickly as possible. Yet as she placed the finished tart on the windowsill to cool, Emma couldn't help feeling a quiet pride in her creation. Something tangible she had made with her own hands, something that hadn't existed before her efforts. It was a small accomplishment, trivial compared to her father's empire building or even the Blackwell's agricultural expertise, but it was hers. Perhaps, she thought fleetingly, there might be more to learn here than simply how to endure punishment. Perhaps, though she wasn't ready to admit it aloud, a month on Blackwell Farm might show her aspects of herself that Manhattan never could. The thought was both intriguing and terrifying, a tiny seed planted alongside those she had tended in the greenhouse, its growth potential still unknown. By the end of her first week at Blackwell Farm, Emma's body ached in ways she'd never experienced before. Her once manicured hands now bore calluses and small cuts from endless hours of work. The designer clothes she'd packed remained untouched in her suitcases as she rotated through the practical farm attire that Catherine had provided. Each morning began with a 5 a.m. alarm, hearty breakfasts she was now too hungry to refuse, and long days of physical labor that left her collapsing into bed by 9 p.m. From transplanting seedlings to weeding vegetable beds, feeding livestock, to packaging CSA shares, Emma had experienced more manual labor in 7 days than in her entire previous life. And despite her initial determination to hate every minute, she was discovering something unexpected, moments of genuine satisfaction hidden within the exhaustion. "You're getting the hang of it," Dylan commented as they worked side by side in the berry patch, carefully thinning raspberry canes to ensure better fruit production. It was the first direct compliment he'd given her, and Emma felt a surprising glow of pride. "These plants are more forgiving than the tomato seedlings," she replied, downplaying her growing competence. Dylan straightened, stretching his back. "Don't sell yourself short. You've come a long way from the princess who couldn't identify a raspberry bush a week ago." Emma rolled her eyes, but there was less hostility in the gesture than there would have been days earlier. Their relationship had evolved from outright antagonism to something resembling grudging respect. Dylan still challenged her at every turn, but his criticism had become more constructive than dismissive. "I still don't understand why we're removing perfectly healthy canes," Emma said, gesturing to the pile of cut raspberry shoots beside them. "It's about balance," Dylan explained. "Too many canes means the plant's energy is divided. Fewer, stronger canes produce better fruit. Sometimes you have to cut away the excess to allow the essential to thrive." "Sounds like a metaphor," Emma remarked dryly. Dylan's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Farming's full of them. Nature has a way of reflecting life's bigger truths." Before Emma could respond, a distant rumble of thunder interrupted their conversation. Dark clouds had been gathering on the horizon all morning, and now they loomed directly overhead, threatening imminent downpour. "Storms coming in faster than forecast," Dylan said, glancing at the sky with concern. "We need to secure things before it hits." As if on cue, Catherine appeared at the edge of the field, waving urgently. "Weather alert on the radio. Flash. Flood warning for the creek. We need to move." Dylan's expression turned serious. "The seedling trays in the lower field," he said to Emma. "They'll be the first to flood if the creek overflows. We need to get them to higher ground." Without waiting for a response, he took off toward the greenhouse, Emma following close behind. The air had turned electric, heavy with moisture and the metallic scent of approaching rain. By the time they reached the greenhouse, fat raindrops had begun to fall. Inside, Dylan was already gathering trays of newly sprouted vegetable seedlings, hundreds of tiny plants that represented weeks of work and a significant portion of the farm's future income. "Take as many as you can carry to the main barn," he instructed, loading Emma's arms with trays. "Be careful not to tip them. Each one of these is worth hundreds of dollars in future crop yield." The responsibility of his words wasn't lost on Emma. For the first time, she truly grasped the precarious economics of farming, how weather events could destroy months of work in minutes, how thin the margin was between success and failure. As she carefully transported the first load of seedlings through the intensifying rain, the sky opened up completely. Within seconds she was drenched, struggling to keep the precious trays level as she navigated the increasingly muddy path to the barn. Catherine met her at the barn door, taking the trays and directing her where to place them. "As soon as we've got the seedlings, we need to move the goats to higher ground," she shouted over the downpour. "The lower pasture floods quickly." For the next hour, Emma worked alongside the Blackwells in the driving rain, rescuing equipment, securing animals, and reinforcing drainage channels around the fields. The physical demands were beyond anything she'd experienced even in her week of farm work, mud sucking at her boots, rain pelting her face, cold water soaking through every layer of clothing. But something strange was happening inside her. Instead of complaining or looking for ways to avoid the worst tasks, Emma found herself fully engaged, responding to Dylan's directions without hesitation, anticipating needs before they were voiced. It was as if the emergency had bypassed her resistance, connecting her directly to a deeper, more capable version of herself she hadn't known existed. "The creek's breached its banks near the berry fields," Catherine called, returning from checking the property boundaries. "We need to divert the water, or we'll lose the irrigation system." Dylan grabbed several shovels from the tool shed, handing one to Emma. "Ever built a diversion channel?" "First time for everything," Emma replied, surprising herself with her calm determination. They raced to the berry fields, where water was already encroaching on the carefully installed irrigation equipment. Without instruction, Emma began digging alongside Dylan, creating a channel to redirect the flow away from the vulnerable crops and equipment. The work was backbreaking, wet soil heavy on the shovel, rain continuing to fall in sheets, mud spattering with every movement. But Emma persisted, finding a rhythm in the labor, a focus that pushed aside everything but the immediate task. "Like this," Dylan demonstrated, angling his channel to take advantage of the natural slope of the land. "Water always seeks the lowest point. We just need to give it somewhere else to go." Working together, they managed to create a network of crude but effective channels, diverting the worst of the floodwater around rather than through the berry patch. By the time they finished, Emma's muscles screamed with exhaustion, her hands raw despite work gloves, her borrowed clothes plastered to her body with rain and sweat. But as she stood back to observe their handiwork, muddy channels now carrying rushing water safely past the farm's valuable crops, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, genuine accomplishment. Not the hollow satisfaction of a shopping spree or the temporary high of social media validation, but the deep-seated pride of necessary work successfully completed. "You did good," Dylan said simply, resting on his shovel beside her. Coming from him, the straightforward praise meant more than any elaborate compliment from her Manhattan social circle. Emma nodded, too tired for words but warmed by his acknowledgement. As the storm began to subside, they made their way back to the farmhouse, slogging through mud and puddles. Catherine had gone ahead to prepare hot drinks and assess any damage to the buildings. "First lesson of farming," Dylan said as they trudged along. "Nature always has the final say. All we can do is work with it rather than against it." "Is it always this dramatic?" Emma asked, gesturing to the waterlogged landscape around them. Dylan laughed, a genuine sound that Emma realized she hadn't heard from him before. "Not always, but there's always something. Too much rain, not enough rain, early frost, late heat. Farming is essentially a continuous exercise in problem-solving and adaptation. How do you not get discouraged?" The question was sincere, born of her new appreciation for the challenges they faced. Dylan considered before answering. "Because the rewards match the challenges. There's nothing like seeing a field you planted come to life, or harvesting food you've nurtured from seed, or knowing your work directly sustains your community." He glanced at her. Not many people get to see such a direct connection between their effort and its impact. His words resonated with Emma in unexpected ways. What was the impact of her life in New York? What did her days of shopping, brunching, and party-hopping contribute to anyone or anything beyond her own momentary pleasure? At the farmhouse, Catherine greeted them with towels and steaming mugs of homemade hot chocolate. "Everyone all right? No injuries?" "Just mud, lots of mud," Dylan confirmed, accepting a towel gratefully. "We managed to save the berry patch, irrigation and most of the seedlings." "Couldn't have done it without our city girl," Catherine said, handing Emma a mug. "You've got good instincts in a crisis, Emma." The simple praise warmed Emma more than the hot chocolate. "I just did what needed doing," she said quietly. "And that," Catherine replied with a knowing smile, "is the difference between a week ago and today." After hot showers and dry clothes, they gathered in the farmhouse kitchen for a late lunch. The storm had passed, leaving behind clear skies and significant cleanup work for the days ahead. As they ate Catherine's hearty vegetable soup, they discussed priorities for recovery efforts. "The lower field drainage needs to be completely redone," Dylan noted. "That's a two-person job at minimum." "I can help," Emma offered, the words out before she'd consciously decided to speak them. Catherine and Dylan exchanged surprised glances. "It's hard work," Catherine warned. "Digging trenches in mud isn't exactly a spa day." Emma shrugged. "I think we've established I can handle more than any of us expected." She paused, then added with a small smile, "Besides, my manicure is already ruined. Might as well go all in." Dylan studied her with newfound respect. "We'll start tomorrow then. Early, before the ground dries too hard." That evening, as Emma collapsed into bed, Exhausted beyond measure, but with a strange sense of satisfaction, she reached for her phone to record a voice memo, a habit she'd developed to document her farm imprisonment, as she'd initially called it. "Day 7, she began, then hesitated. What could she say about today that wouldn't sound like a complete reversal of her previous complaints? How could she explain, even to herself, the odd pride she felt in her mud-caked boots and aching muscles? "Today, I helped save crops from flooding," she said finally. "I built water diversion channels. I carried seedling trays through pouring rain. I mattered." She ended the recording abruptly, unsettled by her own admission. The idea that her actions today had genuinely mattered, had helped protect the farm's livelihood, stood in stark contrast to her life in New York, where her absence from meetings had caused problems rather than her presence solving them. Sleep came quickly, but her dreams were filled with rushing water, seedlings that needed protection, and the unexpected feeling that she was exactly where she needed to be. The next morning dawned clear and cool, the landscape transformed by yesterday's storm. Puddles reflected the blue sky, and the air smelled clean and renewed. Emma rose before her alarm, her body already adjusting to the farm's early schedule. In the kitchen she found Catherine already up, preparing breakfast and consulting a notebook filled with what appeared to be recovery plans. "Morning," Emma greeted her. "What can I do to help?" Catherine looked up, clearly surprised by both Emma's early appearance and her offer of assistance. "Coffee's just finished brewing, if you want to pour us both a cup. Dylan's doing a property assessment before breakfast." As Emma poured the coffee, Catherine studied her thoughtfully. "You know you've surprised all of us this week, especially yesterday." Emma handed her a mug. "I surprised myself," she admitted. "Your father would be proud," Catherine said carefully. He was always good in a crisis too, thinking clearly when everyone else panicked. The mention of her father stirred complicated feelings. Emma hadn't spoken to him since his brief check-in call days earlier. "Did he tell you why he really sent me here?" she asked, sitting across from Catherine at the table. Catherine considered the question. "He said you needed perspective, that you were losing yourself in a lifestyle that wasn't bringing you real satisfaction." "He thinks I'm spoiled and irresponsible," Emma said flatly. "Maybe," Catherine acknowledged, "but I think he also sees potential in you that you haven't recognized in yourself. Jackson wouldn't have bothered with this whole arrangement if he didn't believe you were capable of more." The idea that her father's actions might stem from belief in her rather than disappointment was novel and slightly uncomfortable. Before Emma could pursue this thought, Dylan entered, mud-splattered. "From his morning assessment, damage report," he announced, pouring himself coffee. "Creek's back within its banks. Irrigation system in the berry fields is intact thanks to our diversion work. Lower field drainage is completely compromised. That's today's priority, and the access road to the north field is washed out." "What about the seedlings we moved?" Emma asked. "All safe," Dylan confirmed. "Good thing, too. They represent about 20% of our summer crop income." After breakfast, Emma found herself back in work clothes, armed with a shovel and rake, following Dylan to the lower field, where yesterday's flooding had overwhelmed the existing drainage system. The area was a mess, standing water in some sections, mud thick enough to pull off boots in others. "We need to re-establish the main drainage channel first," Dylan explained, indicating where water should flow. "Then add secondary channels from the growing beds. The goal is to get water moving away from the root systems before they drown." For the next several hours, they worked methodically across the field, digging, clearing debris, and gradually restoring proper drainage patterns. It was grueling work, physically demanding and frequently frustrating as mud collapsed back into freshly dug channels. "Farming isn't for the faint-hearted," Dylan commented as they paused for water, "or the impatient." "I'm beginning to see that," Emma replied, wiping sweat from her forehead. How do you stick with it when things go wrong? Dylan considered the question seriously. Perspective, I guess. A bad day farming is still a day spent outside, working with nature, creating something real. Even failures teach you something valuable for next time. That's a very philosophical view of shoveling mud, Emma observed, but without her usual sarcasm. Philosophy and farming go well together, Dylan said with a half smile. Lots of time to think while you work. As they resumed their labor, Emma found herself reflecting on his words. Her life in New York offered little time for thought. It was a constant chase for the next distraction, the next party, the next purchase that might temporarily fill the emptiness she pretended not to feel. Here, despite the physical demands, or perhaps because of them, her mind felt clearer than it had in years. The simple rhythms of farm work provided a framework for reflection that her chaotic city life never allowed. By mid-afternoon, they had restored the main drainage channels and were working on secondary systems when Catherine appeared with a thermos of iced tea and sandwiches. "Thought you two could use some sustenance," she called, setting up an impromptu picnic on a dry patch of ground at the field's edge. "How's it coming?" "Slower than I'd like, faster than I expected," Dylan replied, dropping his shovel to join her. "Emma's a quick study with drainage principles. It's basically water engineering," Emma said, accepting a sandwich gratefully, "finding the path of least resistance and then enhancing it." "That's exactly right," Catherine said approvingly. "You've got a good mind for this work." After lunch, they continued until the drainage system was fully restored. Standing back to survey their accomplishment, mud-covered and exhausted, Emma felt that same unexpected pride she'd experienced during yesterday's emergency. They had solved a problem, protected the farm's future crops, and done it through nothing but knowledge, persistence, and physical effort. "We make a decent team," Dylan remarked as they gathered their tools. "High praise from the farm prodigy," Emma teased, their relationship having evolved enough to allow for gentle ribbing. "Don't get used to it," he shot back, but his smile softened the words. Walking back to the farmhouse, tools slung over their shoulders, Emma was struck by how different this exhaustion felt from the kind she experienced after late nights in Manhattan. This tiredness came with visible results and genuine achievement, rather than the hollow fatigue of meaningless excess. After dinner that evening, as Emma helped Catherine with dishes, the older woman brought up a topic that caught her off guard. "Tomorrow's the farmers' market in town," Catherine mentioned casually. "We have a booth there every Saturday. I was thinking you might want to come along and help." Emma nearly dropped the plate she was drying. "You want me to work at a market booth with customers? You've been here over a week now," Catherine pointed out. "You know our products, and you've helped grow or make most of them. Why not help? Sell them too?" The thought of representing Blackwell Farm publicly, interacting with strangers as if she belonged here, gave Emma pause. It felt like crossing a line, moving from reluctant participant to actual advocate. "I don't know," she edged. "I'm not exactly a farm girl. People will see right through me." Catherine's expression was kind but knowing. People will see someone who understands the value of what she's selling because she helped create it. That's all that matters. That night, Emma found herself unable to sleep, Catherine's offer playing on her mind. Working the farmers' market meant publicly aligning herself with the farm, with the Blackwells, with a way of life she'd initially scorned. Yet something about the idea appealed to her. The chance to complete the circle from planting to harvest to market, to see the appreciation on customers' faces for food she'd helped nurture. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, a rare occurrence, given the spotty reception. It was a text from her father. "How are things going? Catherine tells me you've been a tremendous help during the storm recovery." Emma stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. The old Emma would have sent something, sarcastic or sullen, but that response no longer felt authentic to her current experience. "Fine," she typed finally. "Learning a lot. Helping with drainage systems and field recovery." The reply came quickly. "Proud of you. I know this wasn't what you wanted, but thank you for giving it an honest chance." The simple expression of pride stirred something in Emma, a desire to live up to his belief in her capability rather than continue proving his doubts about her character. When had that shifted? When had his approval started to matter again? "Going to the farmer's market tomorrow," she added impulsively. "Helping with the Blackwell booth. You'll be great," came his response. "You've always had a way with people when you choose to use it." Emma set the phone aside, her father's words echoing in her mind. Had she been using her natural people skills for anything meaningful in New York? Or had she merely been performing for an audience that cared only about her money and social status? Saturday morning arrived, bright and clear. Emma, dressed in the cleanest of her borrowed farm clothes, adding her own scarf as a concession to style. As she joined the Blackwells in loading produce, jams, honey, and baked goods into their market van, she felt an unexpected nervousness. "First market day jitters?" Dylan asked, noticing her tension as they arranged berry baskets. "Is it that obvious?" Emma sighed. "Only to someone who's been watching you all week," he replied, the casual admission that he'd been paying attention, making her cheeks warm slightly. "What if I mess up, say the wrong thing about your products?" Dylan's expression softened. "Emma, you've literally had your hands in the soil these berries grew in. You've weeded their beds, pruned their canes, and harvested their fruit. You know more about them than most people who've lived here their whole lives." His confidence in her knowledge struck a chord. It was true. In just over a week, she'd accumulated more practical understanding of food production than in 23 years of privileged urban living. The farmers' market was set up in the town square, a picturesque New England scene with white church steeples and historic buildings surrounding a central green. Dozens of vendors were arranging displays of fresh produce, artisanal foods, handcrafts, and flowers as the Blackwells arrived. Emma helped set up their booth, a simple but attractive display of the farm's organic offerings, from jewel-toned berries to leafy greens, homemade preserves to fresh baked goods. Catherine arranged everything with an artist's eye for color and appeal. "People eat with their eyes first," she explained, as Emma helped position baskets of mixed salad greens. The beauty of fresh food is its own best advertisement. As the market opened and customers began to arrive, Emma initially hung back, watching Catherine and Dylan interact with shoppers. They knew many by name, asked after families, discussed recipes, and shared details about growing conditions that had influenced this week's offerings. Gradually, Emma found herself drawn into conversations. A woman asked about the raspberry jam, and before she knew it, Emma was explaining how they'd salvaged the berry patch during the storm, describing the satisfaction of seeing the irrigation system saved by their hard work. "You really care about these berries," the woman observed, purchasing 2 jars. "I guess I do," Emma realized aloud. "They represent so much more than just fruit." As the morning progressed, Emma grew more confident, sharing her new knowledge about organic growing practices, describing the difference between varieties of greens, and even suggesting preparation methods she'd learned in Catherine's kitchen. During a brief lull, Dylan appeared at her side with bottles of water. "You're a natural," he said, offering her one. "Sold more honey in an hour than I usually do all morning." "It's actually interesting," Emma admitted. "Connecting people directly with their food. In New York, no one thinks about where anything comes from. It just appears in stores or restaurants. That disconnect is exactly what's wrong with our food system." Dylan nodded. "People have lost touch with the basic processes that sustain them." By the end of the market day, the Blackwell booth had sold almost everything they'd brought, a success by any measure. As they packed up the few remaining items and the empty display baskets, Emma felt a glow of accomplishment entirely different from any she'd experienced in her previous life. "You should come again next week," Catherine suggested as they loaded. "The van, the customers responded well to you." The simple invitation carried weight beyond its words. Next week would mark the halfway point of Emma's month-long sentence at the farm. The fact that Catherine was planning for her continued participation, treating her stay as a meaningful contribution rather than an imposed burden, touched something deep within her. "I'd like that," Emma said quietly, surprising herself with her sincerity. On the drive back to the farm, Emma gazed out the window at the rolling Vermont landscape, so different from Manhattan's angular skyline. 2 weeks ago, she'd seen nothing but punishment in these green hills and quiet towns. Now she was beginning to recognize something else: possibility. That evening, as fireflies began to appear in the gathering dusk, Emma sat on the farmhouse porch swing, contemplating the transformation that had begun within her. She wasn't a different person, not entirely, but something fundamental had shifted in her perception of what mattered, what constituted meaningful work, what brought genuine satisfaction. Dylan joined her, offering a glass of homemade strawberry lemonade as he took a seat beside her on the swing. "You sound like you've been farming your whole life," the woman observed with a smile. The comment stayed with Emma throughout the day. She hadn't been farming her whole life, far from it. But the work had begun to feel natural, almost intuitive, in a way her previous pursuits never had. By the time they returned to the farm that evening, exhausted but satisfied with their successful market day, Emma had made a decision. After dinner, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies appear in the gathering dusk, she turned to Dylan. "I want to talk to you about something," she began, her voice betraying her nervousness. "Something important." Dylan set aside his glass of homemade lemonade, giving her his full attention. Over the weeks, they'd moved from adversaries to colleagues to friends, and perhaps to something more complex that neither had fully acknowledged. "I've been thinking about what happens when I leave next week," Emma continued, "about what I'm returning to and what I'm leaving behind." "And," Dylan prompted gently when she paused, "and I don't want to go back to being the person I was. Before I came here," she admitted, the words tumbling out in a rush, "that life feels empty now, all consumption and no creation, all image and no substance." Dylan's expression softened. "So what are you thinking?" Emma took a deep breath. "I'm thinking about staying in Vermont, not necessarily here on the farm, but somewhere nearby. I could finish my business degree at UVM, focus on sustainable enterprise management, use my background and my father's connections to help small farms like this one succeed." She hadn't planned to say so much, had barely formulated the idea, consciously, before this moment. But once spoken, the words felt right. A path that combined her education and privileges with the values and purpose she'd discovered at Blackwell Farm. Dylan was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. "That's not what I expected you to say," he admitted finally. "Is it a terrible idea?" Emma asked, suddenly uncertain. "No," he said quickly. "Not terrible at all, just unexpected. 3 weeks ago you couldn't wait to get back to Manhattan. Now you're considering upending your entire life to stay in a place you initially hated." "I never hated the place," Emma corrected him. "I hated being forced to come here. I hated feeling powerless. But the place itself, the work, the community." She gestured to the darkening fields around them. How could anyone hate this once they truly experienced it? Dylan smiled, the warmth in his eyes visible even in the fading light. "You really have changed, Emma Reid. Is that a good thing?" she asked softly. "I think you know the answer to that," he replied, his hand finding hers on the porch swing between them. They sat in comfortable silence as stars appeared overhead, both contemplating possibilities neither had imagined when Emma first arrived at Blackwell Farm. Sunday morning brought Catherine's return, full of enthusiasm about the conference and gratitude for their management of the farm in her absence. "Everything looks perfect," she declared after inspecting the morning's harvest, ready for restaurant delivery. "I knew you two could handle it." "We had an excellent teacher," Emma replied sincerely. Later that day, as they worked together preparing fields for a new planting, Emma shared her tentative plans with Catherine. "I've been thinking about staying in Vermont," she explained, still feeling her way through the idea. "Not imposing on you, of course, but finding my own place, maybe continuing my education with a focus on sustainable business." Catherine's smile bloomed slowly. "I wondered if that might happen," she admitted. "The farm has a way of capturing hearts when they're ready to be captured." "You're not surprised?" Emma asked. "Honey, I've watched you these past weeks, seen you discovering parts of yourself that Manhattan could never nurture. It would surprise me more if you could walk away from that self-discovery without a backward glance." Catherine's understanding bolstered Emma's confidence in her emerging plan. That evening, she called her father, a conversation she'd been both anticipating and dreading. "Dad, do you have a few minutes to talk?" she asked when he answered. "For you, always," Jackson replied, his tone warm. "Is everything okay at the farm?" "Everything's fine, better than fine, actually." Emma took a deep breath. "That's sort of what I wanted to talk about." She explained her thoughts about staying in Vermont, pursuing studies in sustainable business and finding a way to bridge the worlds she now inhabited, using her privileges and connections to support the kind of meaningful work she'd discovered. At Blackwell Farm, when she finished, the silence on the line stretched so long she feared they'd been disconnected. "Dad, are you still there?" "I'm here," Jackson said, his voice thick with emotion, "just processing what you're telling me. A month ago you couldn't bear the thought of spending 30 days in Vermont. Now you're talking about building a life there." "I know it seems sudden," Emma acknowledged, "but these weeks have changed me, or maybe just helped me rediscover parts of myself I'd buried under parties and shopping and superficial relationships." "Your mother would be so proud of you," Jackson said quietly. "She always believed you had depths others couldn't see." The mention of her mother, rare from her father, brought tears to Emma's eyes. "Do you think she'd understand this decision?" "Sophia understood following your heart better than anyone I've ever known," Jackson replied. "It's why she fell in love with a farm boy with big dreams, even when her parents disapproved." They talked for nearly an hour, discussing practical considerations, educational options, and how Emma might begin this new chapter. By the time they said goodbye, she felt lightened, her father's support removing the last major obstacle to her emerging plans. "I'll still come on Saturday as planned," Jackson told her before they hung up. "We have things to discuss in person, and I'd like to see Catherine and the farm again." The final days of Emma's official sentence passed in a blur of activity. Beyond her regular farm work, she researched housing options in Burlington, explored transfer applications to UVM, and began sketching ideas for what she tentatively called the Bridge Initiative, a program to connect small organic farms with urban markets and investment capital. "You're really serious about this?" Dylan observed as they harvested salad greens together on Friday morning, her last full day of farm work. "Completely serious," Emma confirmed. "Scared, excited, uncertain about exactly how it all fits together, but serious." Dylan straightened from his work, studying her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. "You know, when you first showed up here in those ridiculous boots, I never would have believed you'd become this." "This?" Emma questioned, gesturing to her dirt-stained work clothes and messy ponytail. "Someone who sees value in what we do here," Dylan clarified. "Someone who understands that real fulfillment comes from creating, not just consuming." Someone who's willing to get her hands dirty for something that matters. His words touched her deeply. I had good examples, she said softly. You and Catherine showed me a different way to live, even when I was determined not to see it. That evening, Catherine prepared a special dinner to mark Emma's last night as their official guest. The table was set with a checkered cloth, wildflowers from the farm's borders, and Catherine's best dishes. The meal featured everything the farm produced, a celebration of the full cycle from soil to table that Emma had come to appreciate so deeply. A toast, Catherine proposed, raising her glass of homemade blackberry wine. To Emma, who came to us as a reluctant visitor and leaves as family. To Emma, Dylan echoed, his eyes holding hers across the table. Emotion threatened to overwhelm her. Thank you both, she managed, for your patience, your wisdom, and for showing me a life I never knew I wanted. After dinner, as Emma helped with dishes, Catherine disappeared briefly, returning with a small wooden box. A little tradition around here, she explained, presenting it to Emma. When someone makes a meaningful contribution to Blackwell Farm, they get a keepsake. Inside the box, Emma found a beautifully crafted pendant on a simple leather cord. The pendant was shaped like a raspberry, clearly representing the patch they'd saved during the flood. Dylan made it, Catherine added, as Emma lifted it with trembling fingers. From a piece of maple that fell during the storm. Something beautiful, from something broken. It's perfect, Emma whispered, immediately slipping it over her head. The wooden pendant settled against her collarbone, its weight comforting, a tangible connection to this place that had transformed her. Saturday. Morning arrived clear and bright. Emma rose early, wanting to savor her final sunrise from the farmhouse porch. She'd already packed her belongings, significantly fewer than she'd arrived with, having decided to donate most of her designer clothes to a women's shelter in Burlington. She sat quietly, coffee mug in hand, memorizing the view, the sounds, the smells of early morning on the farm. Whatever came next, these sensory memories would sustain her through the transition. Dylan joined her, wordlessly offering a refill for her mug. They sat in companionable silence, watching the day brighten around them. It's not goodbye, you know, he said finally. Even if you end up living in Burlington instead of here, you'll always have a place at Blackwell Farm. I'm counting on that, Emma replied, her voice steady despite the emotion tightening her chest. A car approaching on the long driveway signaled her father's arrival. The sleek, black luxury vehicle looked almost comically out of place against the backdrop of the weathered barn and farm equipment. Jackson Reid stepped out, dressed more casually, and than Emma had seen him in years, khakis and a button-down shirt rather than his usual tailored suit. He stood for a moment, surveying the farm with an expression of mingled nostalgia and appreciation before his eyes found his daughter. "Emma!" he called, his face lighting with genuine pleasure at the sight of her. She descended the porch steps to meet him, suddenly aware of how different she must look to him now. Tanned, stronger, dressed in simple clothes that prioritized function over fashion, the wooden pendant around her neck. His embrace was warm and lingering. "You look wonderful," he said as they separated. "Healthy, strong." "I feel wonderful," she replied honestly, "better than I have in years." Catherine and Dylan had followed her down from the porch. Jackson greeted them both warmly, with the easy familiarity of old friends, rather than the formality he typically displayed in business settings. "Thank you," he said simply to Catherine, "for everything." "She did the hard work herself," Catherine replied, her hand resting briefly on Emma's shoulder. "We just provided the opportunity." After breakfast together, during which conversation flowed easily between reminiscences of Jackson's farm days and discussions of Emma's emerging plans, father and daughter prepared to depart. The goodbyes were bittersweet, Emma's promise to return, soon tempered by the uncertainty of exactly how her new path would unfold. Catherine's embrace was maternal and firm. "This farm will always be a home to you," she whispered. "Remember that when things get challenging." Dylan's goodbye was more reserved, but equally meaningful. "Don't be a stranger, city girl," he said, the nickname now an endearment rather than criticism. "We've got a farmer's market booth that won't run itself." As they drove away, Emma watched the farm recede in the side mirror, the white farmhouse, the red barn, the fields she'd helped tend, all diminishing but never disappearing completely from view or memory. "They've become important to you," Jackson observed quietly from behind the wheel. "They have," Emma acknowledged, "but so has the work, the purpose, the connection to something real and meaningful." "I sent you there to learn responsibility," her father said thoughtfully. "It seems you found much more." "I found parts of myself I didn't know existed," Emma replied honestly, "and pieces of our family history I never appreciated." She touched the wooden pendant at her throat. "Did you know this is what you were doing when you sent me there, setting all this in motion?" Jackson smiled slightly, keeping his eyes on the road. "I hoped the farm would teach you what it taught me. The value of hard work, the satisfaction of tangible results, the importance of community. But your specific journey, no, that's entirely your own creation." They drove in comfortable silence. For a while, the Vermont landscape unfolding around them in all its summer glory. Finally, Emma broached the subject that would define their immediate future. "I've been researching apartments in Burlington," she began. "Nothing fancy, just a simple place while I finish my degree. And I've been developing a business plan for the Bridge Initiative, connecting small organic farms with urban markets and investment opportunities. I thought perhaps Reid Enterprises might be interested in being our first corporate partner." Jackson glanced at her, pride evident in his expression. "I'd like to see this business plan. It sounds like something that aligns perfectly with our sustainability goals." For the remainder of the drive to Burlington, where they would stay overnight before Emma began her apartment search in earnest, father and daughter talked with unprecedented openness about their family legacy and how Emma's new direction might honor both her father's entrepreneurial spirit and the rural values that had shaped his early life. That evening, as they dined at a farm-to-table restaurant featuring produce from local growers, including Blackwell Farm, Emma realized how profoundly her perspective had shifted. A month ago, she would have seen this meal as merely another trendy dining experience. Now she recognized the web of relationships, labor, and natural forces represented on her plate, the real value behind what she consumed. "What are you thinking?" Jackson asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "I'm thinking about how differently I see everything now," Emma replied. "Food, work, relationships, success, it's all transformed, not because Vermont is inherently better than Manhattan, but because being at the farm stripped away layers of artifice I didn't even know I was hiding behind." Jackson nodded slowly. "That's the thing about farm work. It forces authenticity. Either the crops grow or they don't. Either you put in the effort or things fail. There's an honesty to it that's rare in our usual world." "I never realized how much of my life was performance," Emma admitted. "The right clothes, the right parties, the right social media presence, all carefully curated but ultimately empty." "And now?" her father prompted gently. Emma touched the wooden raspberry pendant at her throat, a tangible connection to her transformative month. "Now I want to build something real, something that matters not just to me, but to others. Something that honors both where I came from and where I've been." As the evening drew to a close, Emma stepped outside while her father settled the bill. The stars above Burlington were fewer than those visible at the farm, but still more numerous than Manhattan's light-polluted sky ever revealed. She breathed deeply, feeling a sense of purpose and clarity that had eluded her throughout her privileged but directionless early adulthood. The spoiled, entitled young woman who had arrived at Blackwell Farm a month ago was gone forever, replaced by someone stronger, more compassionate, and infinitely more purposeful. Her father had sent her to the farm as punishment, hoping to teach her about responsibility. Instead, she had found something far more valuable, a connection to the land, to meaningful work, to a community that valued contribution over consumption, and perhaps most importantly, a connection to the best parts of herself that had been buried beneath years of privilege and indulgence. As Jackson joined her outside, Emma slipped her arm through his. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" he asked, surprised. "For caring enough to send me somewhere I didn't want to go," she replied with a smile. "For believing I could be more than I was showing you." Jackson wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close in a sideways embrace. "You've always had it in you, Emma. You just needed the right soil to grow." Together, they walked toward their hotel, father and daughter united by a deeper understanding than they'd shared in years. Emma's transformation was complete, but her journey was just beginning, roots now firmly planted in fertile ground, ready to flourish in ways neither of them could have imagined when Jackson Reid had made the decision that changed everything. The millionaire's daughter had arrived on the farm as punishment. She was leaving it transformed, with purpose, perspective, and the courage to create a meaningful life on her own terms. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.